Hello students, Mr. Zacek here, back and better than ever, starting Unit 3, and we're going to talk about some lines and angles here in Lesson 3. Now, some of these you've already defined in your glossary, but we're going to get into them a lot more specifically here as we get going. So the first one is parallel lines, and parallel lines are coplanar lines that do not intersect. And the word coplanar is a key word there. Coplanar lines that do not intersect. So the symbol that we use, or the notation that we use for parallel, is we use like two lines like that look like they're parallel. Okay? So we would say, like, as an example over here, if we're looking at our diagram, okay, those two lines would be parallel. So we could say DC is parallel to AB because they're coplanar and they do not intersect. Now, skew lines are non-coplanar lines. So non-coplanar, they are not parallel and they do not intersect. So they're not parallel and do not intersect. This is the reason why in our definition of parallel it's important to include coplanar, because if we just simply said lines that do not intersect, then that would not be sufficient enough. And let me give you an example. I'm going to go over to our diagram here, and if we took like FG and one of the ones we did before, AB, you'll see those two lines are not going to intersect, but they are also not parallel because they're not coplanar. So the example here would be line AB and FG. Those would be skew lines that we have. Okay, moving along, parallel planes are simply planes that do not intersect. So if we're looking at this diagram here, what would be parallel planes? Well, we could take the top of our box, which would be ADCB, plane ADCB would be parallel to plane, and kind of the bottom of the box, EHGF. Okay, so we've got parallel lines, coplanar lines that do not intersect, skew lines, non-coplanar lines that are not parallel and also do not intersect, and then we've got parallel planes. Okay, and then our next term here is transversal. A transversal is a line that intersects two or more coplanar lines at distinct points. Is a line that intersects two or more coplanar lines at distinct points. And we're going to talk a lot about this, what transversals, as we get going here. Okay, so now we're going to identify these different angles, all right? And so we have alternate interior angles, and then we have alternate exterior, and etc. So let's define these in this space here. So alternate interior angles. Now I'm going to kind of highlight in this diagram to help us. The two lines that we have here are line L and line M, okay? And then up here we're dealing with this line here is our transversal. So when we look at these two lines, inside the lines, in between them, I'm going to do some more highlighting here. in between these two lines, this is the points that we call the interior. And interior means interior, yes, I spelled it. Interior means between the two lines. And then we have points that are on the outside, and this would be points out here or up here. Those would be what we call exterior, because they're outside of the two lines. So exterior. So when we talk about interior and exterior, we first have to define the two lines that we're talking about. Okay? So when we have alternate interior angles, the two conditions that these meet is that they are on opposite sides of the transversal and they are interior. Okay, so let's look at what pairs would give us alternate interior angles. Well, that would be angle 4 and angle 6. Okay, angle 4 and angle 6 would be alternate interior, and then angle 3 and angle 5 would also be alternate interior. Again, alternate means opposite sides of the transversal. Interior means they're in that yellow shaded region. Okay, so alternate exterior angles. Well, the alternate word means opposite sides. So opposite sides of the transversal. And then exterior means that they are in the exterior region. So let's see if we can find some pairs of alternate exterior angles. So if we looked at angle 1, what would be on the opposite side? Well, it would be angle 7. Okay, so angle 1 and angle 7. And then angle 2 and angle 8. Now, one other thing to mention is when we're doing this, one of the angles should come from the top grouping and one of the angles should come from the bottom grouping. So we already know a whole bunch of stuff from our previous work about the top grouping. We know, for example, that angle 1 and 2, they form a linear pair. They add up to 180. Angle 1 and 4 form a linear pair. They add up to 180. Angles 1 and 3 and 2 and 4 are congruent to each other because they're vertical angles. So when we're talking about these here, alternate exterior, alternate interior, and corresponding, it's one of the angles always has to come from the top grouping and one of the angles always has to come from the bottom grouping. Okay? So those ones are probably the most, like, the language defines them. Corresponding is a little bit different, okay? Corresponding we need to define. So here's what are the conditions for corresponding angles. Number 1, they're on the same side of the transversal, okay? And then 1 is an interior angle and 1 is an exterior angle. So that's what it means for them to be corresponding angles. They're on the same side of the transversal. 1 is an interior, 1 is an exterior, and again, 1 has to come from each one of these circles. So angle 1 is going to correspond. Angle 1 is an exterior angle, so the other one has to be an interior, but it's got to come from this bottom circle, so that would be angle 5. Okay. Angle 2 is going to correspond, that's an exterior. I need an interior, angle 6. Angle 4, now angle 4 is an interior angle, and I need the exterior on the same side, which would be angle 8. Okay, and then angle 3 is going to correspond to angle 7. All right, so they got to be on the same side. 1 is interior and one is exterior. All right. And then our last one, same side interior angles. Well, we really have the definition right there. Okay. Sometimes called consecutive interior angles. So this would be like angle 4 and angle 5. They got to be on the interior. And then if we go to the other side of the transversal, we'd see angle 3 and angle 6. Okay, so when we get into parallel lines, what we're going to find is that there are some key relationships that exist between these pairs of angles. But for right now, it's really important for us to be able to identify these 4 different types of angle pairs. Okay, so this diagram is very helpful for you. Think about the circle on the top, circle on the bottom. What's the interior? What's the exterior? All right, and that's really going to help us as we move forward working on lots of stuff with parallel lines. All right, good luck on your assignment.